Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Hybrid Ag webinar. So my name is Sarah Tinsley, and I'm a member of the Hybrid Ag Research and Support team. I'm excited to introduce this bud initiation webinar, which is the fourth part in a six-part series of events focused upon the stages of plant nutrient importance scheduled for this year. Through orchard walks, field trials, and webinars like this one, we'll take you on a graphic journey through the season, looking deep into the technical aspects and scientific facts about soil health and plant nutrition. We know that you're all busy, but we think there's significant value in taking time to take a step back from our businesses in order to better understand exactly what is happening in your soil and in your plants in order to have healthy soil, healthy plants, nutrient-dense food, and of course, bigger profits. So Hybrid Ag are on a quest to transform food for health, and that's our purpose. So we're continuing to curate research from the last 150 years worth of soil and plant nutrition research and data during our journey to discover what makes food healthy and how to better grow nutrient-dense food. And this is probably one of the world's most comprehensive databases in this field, and we'd like to share that with you across our webinars and blog posts. Many of the subjects that we're going to be covering throughout these events will be quite technical, and we don't make apologies for that. So we try to present these subjects in a way that's easy to follow along with, but if you do have any questions and would like to discuss any details with us after the webinar, please get in touch with us and we'll be happy to talk it out with you. So now to introduce the panelists for today. So Amos Rowe is one of our support and research team members. He has over 10 years experience in the industry, including managing nutrient programs and formulating soil and plant nutrition programs. Josh Richardson is one of our research agronomists, and he's a subject matter expert in plant nutrition and soil health, with a particular interest in pome fruit, stone fruit, and cherries. He's also got a family background in broadacre grain production. And me, my name is Sarah Tinsley, so I'm Hybrid Ag soil scientist working at the Hybrid Ag Research and Support Centre in Wangaratta. I coordinate educational material like this webinar. So I'm currently completing an honours year in soil science, and I have a passion for making scientific information usable and available to everybody. So if you do have questions about the content of this webinar as we go along, please feel free to leave them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll be able to address them at the end. So now that we're all introduced, Amos, would you like to kick us off and tell us what we're going to be focusing on today?
Thanks, Sarah, and good morning to everyone listening in this morning. It's great to see so many join the webinar. To put today's topic into context, I'd like to explain exactly where within the season we'll be focusing today. In this webinar series, we've been talking predominantly about tree crops, but the majority of the pieces discussed apply across a wide range of crops and plants. So we've divided a season into the 6 stages listed here. This webinar is part 4 of the series, focusing on bud initiation. It's important to understand and think about each of these stages separately, even though at times we experience more than one of these stages happening simultaneously through a growing season. Understanding the requirements of each stage helps us to monitor and address the needs of the plant through the season. Exceptional yields and quality come when a plant experiences little to no stress and or nutrient imbalances across any of these stages. If you're interested in learning more, follow us on our social media channels for more information on upcoming webinars and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So this webinar will cover 4 topics. First, what is bud initiation? Second, we'll look at the role leaves play in supplying energy for bud initiation. Third, we'll talk about energy competition within the plant during this time. And finally, we'll discuss the nutrient requirements and best practices for strong bud initiation. So what is bud initiation? When we speak about bud initiation, we're referring to when a plant sets buds that will develop the following year. The size, strength, and number of these buds forms the base of the yield potential for the following year. This stage is critically important in tree crops and some berry crops like blueberries, raspberries, and blackberries. Bud initiation is important to understand and appropriately support, because we can think about it in terms of laying a foundation. If we lay a poor foundation for a crop, it significantly reduces our yield potential. On the other hand, if we lay a strong foundation every year, we're setting ourselves up for sustained success. Bud initiation occurs in different crops at different times, so it's important to understand the cycles of each of our crop types and when bud initiation occurs. For example, in deciduous fruit trees, initiation of buds begins soon after the leaves are formed and development of these buds continues throughout the growing season and to a lesser extent during the winter months. In some plants, it occurs while fruit is still on the tree, vine or bush, and in some crops the cycle happens more than once a year. The buds and flowers, or reproductive parts of a plant, have the highest concentrations of trace minerals of the entire plant. They have significantly higher levels of trace minerals than the leaves, than the wood, or even the roots. It's interesting, there's studies that have been done that show that adequate levels of nutrition, and not just trace minerals, can increase formation of both flower and leaf buds, which means that we can have larger, stronger buds and more of them. And in turn, that dramatically can increase the amount of fruit grown in the following season. Bud initiation also plays a key role in biennial bearing, which is an issue that some growers deal with in particular crop types, and nutritional management can assist to achieve a more consistent and more even crop load year on year. So we've got some pictures here of newly formed buds. This is in a sweet cherry crop. You can see from these images how early in the season this cycle begins. For example, the picture on the left, you can see that the buds have begun to be formed while the fruit is still green. So really very early on in that crop cycle. So when we think about buds, it's important to understand the different forms of buds and the roles that they play within the plant. So we can classify buds as either vegetative or reproductive. A vegetative bud being one that will develop into flower or flowers and then turn into fruit, and a vegetative bud being a bud that will develop into leaves. But early on in the bud formation cycle, there's no easy way to differentiate between the kinds of buds. But as the trees start to move and the buds begin to swell, that's when we can more easily begin to differentiate between the kinds of buds that are present. Many of you will be familiar with looking at buds, obviously, and as a general rule, reproductive buds tend to be more round in shape, whereas the vegetative buds will tend to be longer and more pointy in shape than the reproductive buds. So with these pictures here, you can see that these are buds that have been cut open during that bud swell phase to determine whether they are flower or leaf buds. And looking at the buds at this stage can help us to begin to estimate crop loads early in the season for many tree crops. It's also important to understand that the ratio of vegetative to reproductive buds can be influenced by nutritional management and nutrient applications, particularly those applications that we do at post-harvest or pre-dormancy. We'll look at these late season applications in more detail in part 6 of this webinar series later in the season. And this is another view of a reproductive bud, taken from a bird's eye view, if you like. So you can see, looking in from the top of the bud, that you can see there's individual flowers that are beginning to form within the bud there. So I'd now like to hand over to Sarah to talk about energy supply for bud initiation.
All right, great. Thanks for that, Amos. So I can see that we do have some great questions coming in. So just a quick reminder to everybody that if you do have questions, please send them through using the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So now energy. Energy for bud initiation is grounded in carbohydrates that are generated during photosynthesis. Photosynthesis begins as water is brought up through the roots of the plant and is combined with carbon dioxide that's been taken in through the leaves, and light also that's been taken in through the leaves. Using the energy of the sunlight, water and carbon dioxide are transformed into sugars that can then be used by a plant, and an oxygen gas that's released back into the air. This process occurs through a variety of different chemical reactions inside chloroplasts, an example of which is pictured in the blue on the top right-hand corner of the screen. So using this example, leaves can be imagined as solar panels, providing the plant with energy to run. So maximising these photosynthetic processes during bud initiation means that more energy is produced overall, and this means that the buds that can be produced are more abundant, they're stronger, and they tend to be larger as well. As there are many factors involved in a plant being able to produce large amounts of carbohydrates through photosynthesis. So firstly, there needs to be sufficient leaf surface area to catch sunlight. So this can be influenced through both the size of each leaf and their overall abundance. So a higher leaf surface area has been linked to stronger bud initiation. Sun exposure being higher as well, especially from long days, has been linked to a stronger bud initiation, and higher temperatures have also been seen to have this effect. Water stress has been shown to have an impact on the total strength of bud initiation, especially in almond trees. So this manifests in a reduced number of buds overall per branch and a subsequently lower yield the following year. So sun exposure and water availability can both influence this strong photosynthetic energy production. And finally, appropriate nutrient support creates healthier leaves and plants that are more able to photosynthesize efficiently. So this also encourages that strong bud initiation due to there being more energy available. So now I will pass back to Josh to talk about energy competition and nutrient requirements.
Thanks, Sarah. So bud initiation is a reproductive process, and in most tree crops this happens while there's still fruit on the trees. Fruit fill, on the other hand, is a vegetative process, which is a different hormone balance to the reproductive process. Now, I won't go into the differences in this webinar, but if you are interested in learning more, you can go back to part 2 of the series on flowering and cell division. So most of the principles of flowering apply at bud initiation. However, it's really important to get the balance between vegetative and reproductive dominance just right. One of the main ways this level of imbalance can be shown is through biennial crop cycling. So biennial bearing or on year, off year is usually caused due to imbalances in nutritional management. It's very common in crops like almonds, where it's now become normal to have a heavy crop one year, followed by a lighter crop the next. So in the heavy year, the tree is pushing all its energy into growing the current crop, as well as being fed lots of vegetative nutrients such as potassium, nitrates and calcium. And I will speak to calcium shortly, as it is also a reproductive nutrient. But with an imbalance in the plant, the result is a smaller capacity for setting buds that will form the next year's crop, and a subsequent light crop load will come in the following year. In the year of the light crop, there's obviously plenty of unused energy in the tree, and it's used to set a lot of buds and then leads to another strong crop the following year. So we break this cycle easily on the heavy year by adding in some reproductive nutrients and managing our inputs to balance the plant so that we can initiate good buds, but also continue to fill the current crop. Finally, let's look at some of the nutritional requirements for plants at this time. So some of the key nutrients for bud initiation. So calcium, as we referred to earlier, required for strong cell division, as has been discussed in part 2 of the series. So strong cell division leads to more and larger buds. Calcium is also, as well as being a vegetative nutrient, it's also a reproductive nutrient. So while we're trying to fill fruit and maintain energy, we can also support the reproductive function of the tree by using calcium applications in place of some potassium applications. Obviously, potassium is a vegetative nutrient. Boron, a transporter of calcium. So again, as discussed in part 2, boron is equally or especially important for transporting calcium to the furthest buds away from the center of the plant. Manganese, because of its strong reproductive function, just will increase the overall amount of buds forming during this time. Zinc is very important to be stored in the buds. It's important for getting larger spur leaf size as the buds burst in the springtime. Obviously, larger leaf, larger solar panel, more energy. Copper is especially important in your buds. So copper will help get a stronger or maintain strong pollen tube strength, which in turn will allow you to have a stronger, more consistent pollination. Now, seaweed, not a nutrient as such, but it can be beneficial at this time to provide a lot of plant available nutrient boosts and encourage buds that are larger, stronger, and more abundant. They can also supply a source of plant hormones. That's a lot to think about with just those few nutrients, and you might have many questions about what's the best levels of each of these nutrients to apply and when should I apply it. And there's no one answer, so it depends obviously on your crop type and what the season's doing and all that sort of stuff. So the most important thing is to take regular leaf tests. So leaf testing through this time, particularly a differential leaf sap analysis, where we can look at the movement of nutrients between the old and the new leaf. Very useful tool for helping us to figure out what nutrients are lacking, what nutrients are abundant, and what nutrients are being drawn down. So another important note, to try and avoid nitrates at this time. So try and avoid calcium nitrate or potassium nitrate. So nitrate's obviously a vegetative nutrient as opposed to ammonium nitrogen. So if nitrogen is required according to a leaf test, you can apply it as a foliar application of like a low urea or an ammonium form of nitrogen. So we just want to try and avoid nitrates. Sum up really quickly, I've got a couple of take homes. It's very important to know when a bud initiation happens in your crop. Every crop is different, but in a tree fruit, bud initiation generally occurs quite early in the current year's crop cycle, as we saw with those pictures of cherries earlier, while the cherry was still green. Bigger and better quality solar panels, you get more energy out of it. So the same principle applies to leaves. Big, wide, healthy leaves are most effective at capturing the sunlight and supplying appropriate energy for different plant functions. Proper targeted nutritional management will reduce your biennial crop cycling, even to the point where it's almost not measurable. And then finally, test, don't guess. So the use of differential leaf sap analysis can ensure your nutrition and energy management is optimized and ensure you don't waste time or money applying nutrients that are not needed. That concludes the technical aspects of today's webinar. I'll pass back to Sarah for some concluding remarks, and then we'll do some questions.
Great, thanks for that, Josh. And thank you again to everyone for joining us on our webinar today. In our next webinar, we're going to be following on from today's discussion, covering a stage of ripening. So this webinar will be happening next week on Thursday. So if you have any feedback from this webinar to help us improve, then we'd love to hear from you. So chuck us an email on support@hybridag.com.au or give us a ring on 5722 7555. So we've had a few questions coming in during this webinar, which we will cover in a document that will be emailed out to everyone. But for now, Amos and Josh, would you like to select 3 or 4 of the most interesting questions that we've got there? So Amos, would you like to kick us off?
Thanks, Sarah. So we've had some really great questions come in. One that has been asked is, can you give an example of where you've seen biannual bearing being evened out? So an example that comes to mind is an apple grower that we're working with that was having significant issues with biannual bearing in a particular variety. I just can't recall off the top of my head what variety it was in this example, but as Josh was referring to earlier, heavy crop one year, really light crop the following year. It makes it difficult to manage a lot of the factors that come into play. But through addressing the nutritional requirements and focusing on getting that balance right, we're able to, over a period of years, progressively even out that biannual bearing to the point where that particular grower was achieving heavy yields year on year. So from memory, 100+ tonnes per hectare of apples year on year for 5+ years.
Great, thanks for that, Amos. Josh, would you like to answer a question as well?
Yep, one that's caught my attention is there anything I can do to increase the amount of reproductive buds? Yep, good question. So key is to minimising stress to the plant. So you want good water availability and good levels of calcium and manganese. And then obviously maintaining nutrient balance to the tree after harvest. So directly after harvest all the way through to senescence would be the key there, I think.
Great, thanks for that, Josh. And we'll just be mindful of everyone's time, so we might just answer one more question here now, but the answers will be sent out in that document, like I said earlier. So Amos, would you like to do just one more before we wrap up today?
Sure, thanks, Sarah. Obviously, we do want to be mindful of everyone's time. Everyone is obviously busy at this time of year and plenty happening. So there's one more question that's come through here. Can I increase leaf size without nitrate application? So it's a great question. And what we've observed is that, as Josh was referring to, maintaining that nutrient balance post-harvest or through to that through pre-dormancy up to the point where the leaves drop. If we are maintaining a good nutrient balance and focusing on some of those individual elements we've spoken about, what that does is provides the tree with a lot of energy for when it comes out of that dormancy in spring, and in turn that energy then gives you exceptional leaf size and quality, and we've seen that again over a number of different crops, different varieties and different growers, different areas. So yes, the answer is yes, you can have increased leaf size without nitrate application.
Could I just jump in there, Amos? So just to confirm that, so a nitrate, a leaf that's grown with a lot of nitrates will tend to be quite long and a little bit curled. So definitely balancing that nitrate out with we found a bit of fish or kelp. It certainly helps because that obviously gets that plant available micronutrients, but definitely balancing the leaf sap out with sap testing will get a wider, flatter leaf. So again, you think about the solar panel, which Sarah referred to earlier. Your solar panel works better if it's out flat, not curled up, half folded up. So it definitely can increase the size of that nitrate applications.
All right, great. Thank you for that. So anybody, if you haven't asked a question today, but you would like more information, please don't hesitate to drop us an email or give us a call. All of the questions and answers from this event will also be available through our certified partners, who are David Morello at Morello Fert, Noel Jones at Sahara and Elders, Craig Swanbury at Fruit Doctors, and Graham McNeil at GB Crop. And finally, a thank you to all of the technical experts from around our industry who have helped bring you these events. So we'll see you next time, and don't forget, happy soils make healthy souls. Goodbye.